Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Walk and Talk. My name's Lisa, and I am your host here to talk yet again about all things dog training and behaviour in a way that I hope makes it feel practical, accessible, useful, all the positive adjectives for you. I hope you've all had a fabulous week. I hope you're all nearly set for Halloween. Have you carved your pumpkins yet? Have you bought in all of your Haribo and your chocolate bars, or do you not bother? Do you just scrooge it and close the curtains? I don't know. I fully understand if you do, by the way, bearing in mind my audience, because I know that for some people, the doorbell is just basically like someone pushing cocaine through the letterbox to your dog, and the idea of the doorbell going off every 5 minutes for the entire evening probably fills many dog owners with dread. And if that is you, by the way, I have a free printable poster that you can stick on your door. I've had it available for a few years now. I think 3 years. This is probably the third year, maybe the fourth year. I don't know. But I reshare it every year, and that will basically get you out of Dodge on October 31st. Now, to warn you, you do still need to pop out a bowl of sweets to go with it. You don't get out of your festive obligations entirely, but it's just a fun little Halloween poster that says, my dog finds Halloween a bit scary, so please don't knock on the door, but help yourself to sweets and treats, etc. Basically, it says that in a nice Halloweeny way. If you head to my Instagram, which is @ListenDogTraining, it will be in the link in my bio because I put it in just every October. Or you can head straight to my website, which is listendogtraining.com. And in the blog section, there is a whole blog article that is about Halloween, I think. There's a picture of the poster in the graphic at the top of the blog. So, and there's a link in there to the poster. You don't have to give your email address or anything. You can literally just go in, click on it, download it straight away, print it at home, and have a peaceful Halloween on me. And you're very welcome. Anyway, enough about Halloween. We're not here to talk about that as much as I love it. Let's talk about what we actually did come here to talk about. And this week, that is a topic that sits at the very heart, fundamentally, of understanding dog behaviour, particularly stress behaviours, like reactivity or separation anxiety, that kind of thing. And it's something I see all the time in my work, and that is how your dog's emotion drives their behavior. We kind of know this already, right? We know that our dogs are responding to the way they feel with their behavior choices, but also flip it, how behavior can actually drive emotion. Now, you might be thinking, well, of course, Lisa, dogs react because they're anxious, because they're scared, they're frustrated, maybe because they're excited. Yes, that is true. Emotion absolutely does drive behavior. Like I said, we know this. But I want to talk today about the part that often gets overlooked entirely. And that's how the behaviors themselves can keep a dog stuck in a loop of stress or over arousal. And this is huge for training dogs who suffer with these stress responses, because for some reason it's not really talked about a lot, I don't think. So as owners, particularly owners of reactive dogs, we usually, as a result, focus on calming the emotion first. But I want to highlight the fact that actually stopping the behavior early enough can be just as powerful as calming the emotion itself. So if that sounds confusing, don't worry. We're going to break this down in a practical way today. So that basically by the end of this episode, you will have a really good understanding of, first of all, how emotion drives behavior. That's the classic view, right, that we're used to, how emotion drives behavior. But then I also want to explore with you how behavior can actually maintain or escalate those emotional states, and how recognizing these loops when they're happening before our eyes can actually inform your training strategy to make it so much more powerful when it comes to long-term behavior change. And as usual, obviously, I want to give you what you came here for, which is some practical ways you can apply this knowledge with your dog today when you finish listening, if you are one of the owners that faces this particular struggle. So, okay, let's start at the beginning with the idea that emotion drives behavior. So, emotion is basically the lens through which dogs experience the world, right? And when a dog is anxious or stressed, or they're just highly aroused, they're worked up, their behavior changes. Their thresholds for reacting to things drop, and their decisions often default to what I like to call safety strategies, things like barking, lunging, freezing, retreating, and so on. So, my reactive dog owners will get this. Just imagine a dog who's usually calm on walks, they're having a nice time, they're sniffing the sniffs, they're loving life. But then they see another dog across the street, and suddenly their body stiffens up, their gaze locks on, and before you know it, they're barking, they're pulling, they're lunging, they're going crazy. Now, that behavioral reaction isn't random. It's emotional arousal driving a behavior choice. And it's worth remembering here that emotional responses are highly contextual. So, one anxious dog might just freeze or drop to the floor. Another anxious dog might bark and lunge. Another might just retreat silently. And it comes down to a lot of factors, really, in determining what your dog chooses to do in response to that emotion. Um, it comes down to previous experiences, what they've learned from those, the environment, genetics, even the behavior of the human who is handling them all play a role to a greater or lesser extent. But the overarching point is that these behaviors are selected as a response to being emotionally triggered. But what I want to hammer home today is that this is really only half of the story, because whilst emotions absolutely drive behavior, how many times have I said that already? Behavior can also reinforce or escalate emotional states. So let's go back to our imagined dog who has just spotted another dog across the street, and now he is barking and lunging. To our little dog here, that behavior feels like a solution. He feels like, I'm not powerless. I've chosen to do a thing. I'm doing something about this. But the kicker with his behavior choice is it actually fuels the stress that triggered it in the first place. Barking and lunging increases adrenaline, cortisol, heart rate. So essentially, it keeps the dog's nervous system elevated, which means the dog doesn't really get a chance to calm down naturally. And because the emotional system, if you like, is still heightened, they're now much more likely to react next time. The reaction itself will probably come a hell of a lot quicker. It might be a lot bigger. And so we just get stuck in this feedback loop where we see a trigger. This triggers emotional arousal. This emotion triggers a behavior choice. This behavior triggers a heightening of the emotional arousal. This heightening triggers further behavior, and so on until we're stuck. We're just stuck in this cyclical physiological nightmare from which the dog is going to find it increasingly difficult to escape and to reset, because their reaction to their stress is literally fueling the continuation of that stress. It's kind of similar to human psychology. If you think about compulsive behaviors like nail biting or just like obsessively ruminating on a problem, performing the behavior itself might feel like it gives short term relief, but ultimately it just reinforces the negative emotion. And dogs operate in the same way. Every time they bark, they lunge, they snap, they're reinforcing that arousal. So, whilst we can absolutely try to recondition our dog's emotions about their triggers, it's also important to think about intercepting their behavioral response as well. interrupting the cycle to give the nervous system a chance to recover and to provide a window of time in which our reconditioning work has the chance to actually make a difference. So, what does this mean practically for training with dogs like these? Well, it means we need to think in a bi-directional way. We're not just reducing the dog's anxiety, we're also preventing the dog from perpetuating stress through their own behavior. So, here's a really useful framework you can use if reactivity or anxiety or stress induced behaviors are something that you and your dog are currently trying to work through. Okay. Number one, emotional regulation. So we need to support the dog's stress threshold. Yeah. Number two, then, is behavioral threshold management. So, can we take action before full reactivity kicks in? Can we interrupt or intercept or redirect the dog or just manage our way out of a behavior escalation if we get in quick enough? And number three, then following that is behavioral substitution. So if we can interrupt our dog or intercept them before they really kick off, can we then offer safe, reinforced alternative behaviors to replace the reactive behavior choice? And ultimately, with this approach, early intervention is everything. Catch the behavior before it escalates and immediately redirect it to a calm, reinforced alternative if you can. Now, with my reactivity training program, we actually teach and reinforce these alternative behaviors first. We teach them at home, not in the situation at all. We learn them at home in a calm environment first, and then they become your toolkit to take out with you and use when you are faced with your dog's triggers. Because it's all very well being able to intervene and interrupt your dog early, but if at that moment you then have no high value alternative behavior option to offer your dog, and think about it, this behavior is going to need to have a super strong reinforcement history already from you guys practicing and practicing at home for it to stand a chance of outcompeting your dog's usual habitual behavior choice. Otherwise, your dog is just going to resort to plan A no matter what, right? And it's worth remembering with any reactivity work, in order to build those successes, you will need to bank some early wins by making it really easy for your dog. And that's usually achieved with distance, to be honest, and then gradually increasing the challenge and complexity over time. So, as an example, another really common problem a lot of people ask about is dogs who react to animals on the TV, or they react when they see other dogs on the TV. Now, if we want to be able to redirect that dog and give them an alternative behavior to do, we want to interrupt them once they've seen their trigger, but before they react. Now, for some dogs, like that's just not possible because they will just see it and boom, they'll explode. So we need to make it easier for them. We need to make it less triggering. And with a TV, the ways you can do that are you can have a shot of an animal that's very, very far away. So the animal is very, very tiny. You might have it paused entirely. So it's just a still shot of a tiny, far away animal on the screen. And the dog's going to look at it. But maybe they're not super aroused because without the movement, they're not tipped over the edge. Or maybe without the volume, if they can't hear the dogs barking, if it is dogs, they're not tipped over the edge. And then you might work it up to have some movement on the screen, but it's still muted. Um, or you might start with the really slow movement, or you might, like if your dog is triggered by animals, but really, really triggered by dogs, that's quite common. You can have just I don't know, have an elephant on the screen and then work your way up to dogs because elephants actually move really slowly. So it's a lot less triggering. So you see what I mean about how we're just raising the levels of difficulty, but we need to start early because we need to bank those wins, because we need the dog to learn that oh, actually, there is an alternative here. And if I do pause and if I do just check in and see if there's something else to do, like there's an option to get rewarded. But they'll never learn that if they don't ever bank a success in doing that, if you see what I mean. So that's all very well with the TV. In real life, it tends to just be distance. You need to start at a vast distance where your dog is under threshold, bank those wins, and then gradually work up the complexity and difficulty level for your dog from there. The last thing you want to do is flood your dog, which basically just means throwing them in at the deep end and hoping they figure it out, really, because all that's going to do is entrench that stress feedback loop. And it's always worth remembering as well your own energy and body language, because if you didn't listen to my podcast episode in previous times on how we co-regulate with our dogs, then go back and have a listen. But basically, your dog is vibe checking you all the time, right? So if you're stressed and you're worried, they're more likely to pick up on that and they're more likely to be stressed. So, okay, let's make this super practical now. If you have a dog who reacts to other dogs out on walks, here's where you're going to start. So, first of all, get super observant, super observant. Pay attention because you need to notice the subtle signals your dog gives before they go full blown reactive. And that can include things like just their body stiffening up. You might see it in their hind legs, particularly that their legs tense. They might lock their gaze. They might start tongue flicking or lip licking. You might see like a tense tail. Their whole kind of movement might just sort of slow down. These are pre reactive signals and they're golden because they give us a chance to intervene before the behavior escalates. So, watch your dog closely on walks this week and just see if you can spot those early cues. It might feel really subtle at first, but once you start actively looking for them, they become impossible to miss. And the moment you see them, that's your window of opportunity. That's the moment you take an action to gently interrupt the behavior before it spirals into something that will then only feed the stress. Now, that could be something as simple as a calm head turn, a little body pivot, or a verbal eye contact cue. The idea is to redirect your dog's attention before the reactive behavior fully kicks in. And here's the not to be skipped bit, right? As soon as you've interrupted, you give them something positive to do instead. Maybe it's a hand touch, direction change, retreating to a safe spot that you've trained, like middle or whatever it is. And of course, you reward them heavily for that alternative choice because you want them to learn that this new behavior is far more rewarding than the old one. And like I said, over time, you can gradually make it a little bit harder. Reduce the distance between your dog and the trigger. Increase the complexity of the environment and slowly fade out the interruption cues as your dog gains more and more control over themselves. But always remember the emotional reset. After each interaction, give your dog some time to recover, reward calm behavior, and keep the sessions really short and positive. That's how you build momentum in the right direction, letting the behavior and emotional state work together rather than against each other. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to touch on some common mistakes that people can make with this. Okay. But I know you're not going to because you're awesome and you've paid attention, right? So, one of the biggest mistakes is just simply intervening too late, frankly. If you wait until the dog is already barking, lunging, spinning, full blown shout at the world mode, the behavior has already taken over, fully taken over, and it is much harder to change the emotional state. We don't really have access to the part of the brain that you need to do it at that point. So, early intervention really is everything. Another trap with reactivity work is suppression of the behavior, but without any alternative. Just telling your dog no or stop. It doesn't teach them a better way to cope. And that's why it's so important to replace the behavior with something safe and rewarding. So your dog actually has a choice and feels like they are making a choice. Consistency, as with pretty much any and every aspect of dog training, is definitely another key factor. Dogs are pattern learners. They are master identifiers of patterns and routines. So if you are consistent, they learn to trust the system and predict what is expected. If you are inconsistent, it just prolongs that loop and the dog's stress just remains high. And finally, don't ignore those pre-reactive signals. I cannot stress this enough. Those tiny, tiny, tiny early cues are your guideposts. They tell you when to step in, when to redirect, and when to give your dog a break. Watching and responding to these subtle little signs is what separates reactive, stressed out dogs from confident, well regulated ones long term. So, if you take just 3 practical action steps away from today's episode, let them be these, okay? First, really observe your dog's pre reactive signals this week and take note, like get familiar with them, understand what they are for you and for your dog. Second, experiment with gently interrupting the behavior early and giving a safe alternative, something that you've practiced at home. Um, Remember to choose that alternative behavior before you're in the situation. Teach it at home first. Pop it in your toolkit so you're ready. And third, take stock of how your dog's emotional recovery improves over time and then adjust your pace accordingly with how quickly you're traveling through this process with your dog. If you feel like you'd like more in depth help with this, you can download my full day by day reactivity training pack from my website, which is listendogtraining.com. And remember, you guys can use the discount code podcast10 for 10% off. But otherwise, oh, I think that's it for today. I think I've waffled on for quite a long time. I really hope you found this episode useful or interesting or helpful. As always, if you did, please feel free to share it. Send it to a dog owning friend who you think needs a little bit of help, or leave me a little review. It's completely free to do and it helps me so much with reaching more dog owners who might be struggling themselves, so that they can access some free advice that could hopefully really help them out of a spot of bother too. But for now, thank you so much for listening. I will leave you now to enjoy the rest of your walk, and I'll see you the same time next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.